Welcome, and thank you for joining me on this quiet journey back in time to one of the toughest chapters in American history, the Great Depression, seen through the eyes of the farmers who lived it. Days stretch endlessly, filled with back-breaking work, patching fences, and hoping the bank overlooks your debts just a little longer. In this story, you'll meet families whose lives splintered under the weight of lossum, moving westward, chasing new dreams, others staying behind, slowly fading into the dust. You'll discover hidden diaries, folk rituals born of desperation, and the stark contrast between the velvet-gloved elite miles away and the dirt beneath worn boots. And behind it all, the slow, careful maneuvers of government programs tempting to play a game of chess with land and livelihoods, often missing the human heart of the matter. So, settle in, breathe deeply, and let yourself drift through the dust, debt, and dreams of those who endured. This is why it sucked to be a farmer during the Great Depression and more. Settle in. Let your body sink gently into whatever quiet space surrounds you now. The hum of the present fades, and in its place, a slower rhythm begins to emerge, one that smells faintly of dry earth, old wood, and baking bread. A rhythm that hums with the wind across endless plains, where fence posts lean wearily under the weight of forgotten years. This is not a tale of bustling cities or grand revolutions. This is a quieter kind of hardship, one often overlooked, one that unfolded in silence, dust, and waiting. Tonight, we're traveling back to the 1930s, to the flatlands of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and beyond, to the dusty belly of America, where families once clung to hope with blistered hands and watched their dreams dry up in the wind. You won't find ticker tape or falling stock prices here. No, this isn't Wall Street's Great Depression. This is what it looked like on the farms, on the land, in the hearts of people who had little to begin with and found a way to carry even less. Our story tonight begins where the day always did at dawn, but this dawn tastes of grit and smells faintly of despair. Let's begin with the miserable mornings. Imagine yourself waking in a room without warmth, without insulation, without even the comfort of quiet. The wooden boards that form the walls of your small house creak under the pressure of a relentless wind that never seems to rest. A wind that carries with it the weight of a seasonless world. You lie on a thin mattress atop a simple wooden frame, its legs uneven, its stuffing compressed to the hardness of a plank hand. As your eyes slowly open, the first sensation that greets you isn't sight or sound, but taste. There's grit on your tongue, a fine dust that settled into your mouth as you slept, making your lips dry, your teeth feel coated. This is not a rare experience. It is how nearly every morning begins, now tasting the land that used to feed you. The room is dim, not because it's night, but because the sun is filtered through a heavy haze of dust. Light struggles to reach the earth now, as if it, too, is tired. You can just make out the silhouettes of your siblings. The floorboards under your bed are rough and splintered. You try to step carefully, remembering the one that always creaks and might wake the baby, but the house groans with you anyway. It always does. The wind finds every crack, every nail hole, and sings a mournful song through the slats, as if trying to remind you it's still there, still watching. The stove hasn't been lit yet. You hear your mother moving quietly, automatically lifting a kettle, coaxing a fire from last night's embers. There's a bitter sound to mornings like these. Not angry, not sharp, just dull and persistent. It's a life that repeats itself in the same muted notes, like a song stuck on a single versano crescendo, no end. The kettle eventually hisses, but the coffee it produces is weak and thin, reboiled over the same grounds that have been used for 3 mornings straight. It smells more like old wood than beans, but it's hot, and hot things feel rare enough to be treasures. Your mother pours it into tin cups, and you cradle yours, not to drink, but to warm your hands. Breakfast is already on the table, a few slices of hard bread, a smear of lard if there's any left, or perhaps some dried apple slices from last year's harvest, now leathery and brown. No one complains, no one speaks. There's a hush that belongs not just to sleep, but to habit. Words feel like luxuries now. Everyone knows what the day will bring. Before you eat, you step outside to draw water from the well. It moves across the prairie like a living thing, whispering through the dry grass and over the empty fields. Your boots hit the porch with a dull thud, and you notice the thin layer of dust already settled across the steps since last night. The yard looks like a battlefield without combat. The ground is cracked and uneven, the color of old parchment, and the chickens few remain pick disinterestedly at nothing. The vegetable patch is long dead. Only a few stubborn weeds remain, and even they are curled and gray around the edges. You reach the pump and begin to work it slowly. The metal handle is rough in your hand, rusted at the joints. You pump once, twice, 3 times. The water that comes is tepid and tastes of iron. It sloshes into the bucket with a tired rhythm. This is what you'll carry back for cooking, for washing, for drinking. It won't be enough, but it never is. The well is shallow now. Your father says it's from the drought, but part of you wonders if the earth itself has decided to close up shop, to hold tight to what little moisture remains. Even the land seems to be retreating. Back inside, your father is eating with a kind of slow, deliberate resolve. Just a quiet understanding that this is what breakfast means now. The kitchen smells faintly of dust, old grease, and burnt wood. You button your shirt as you head outside again. The fabric is stiff from dirt, not from starch. It's in your hair and under your fingernails. It's what you breathe. You're no longer surprised when it comes inside the house, curling beneath the door, resting on your pillow, gathering in the folds of curtains like a silent, constant reminder. At the barn, the air is warm with the scent of old animals, of manure and hay and rot. The mule is still there. She's old now, her ribs visible, her fur patchy. She doesn't bray anymore. She barely reacts when you run your hand along her side. She eats slowly from the trough, where you've mixed what little feed remains with water to stretch it further. You talk to her quietly, not out of affection, but out of routine, the way one might greet a ghost. She's the last animal left who does any work. The pigs were sold off. The chickens barely lay. The cow dried up last year. You're not even sure what you'd do if the mule died. There's no money for another, no means to trade. Without her, you'd carry the plow yourself, though there's little left to plow. The sun is higher now, though its light remains pale and sickly through the airborne dirt. The horizon looks blurred, like a distant memory. There are no animals to guard. It's just something to do. A rhythm, a defiance, maybe. You hammer a nail into a post and feel it reverberate up your arm. And for a moment, it's something solid, something louder than the silence that settled over everything else. By mid-morning, the house is already hot. The wind doesn't cool. It just stirs the air like a slow oven. You think about the neighbors. Some left months ago, piled into rusted trucks, heading west toward a future built on stories and desperation. Others stayed and disappeared more quietly, becoming silhouettes behind dusty curtains, faces you no longer see even on Sundays. The town is quieter each time you visit. Shops are boarded up. The church holds fewer voices. The schoolhouse is nearly empty. Some days, even the mailman doesn't come. You used to read newspapers. Now, they're used to stuff cracks in the walls or line the bottom of drawers. The headlines speak of Roosevelt and recovery, of new deals and government hope, but they feel distant, abstract. Out here, none of it feels real. Out here, the world has narrowed to the size of your fields, your house, your morning walk. Out here, survival is a series of small decisions. How long to ration the flour, whether to slaughter the last hen, whether to sell your wedding ring for kerosene. And still, you wake. You go outside. You fix the fence. You feed the mule. You drink the dusty water. Not because it makes sense, or because you believe things will change, but because it is what people do. Because the land still asks for your labor, even if it no longer rewards it. Because your parents did it, and their parents before them. And so your morning stretches on, not in hours, but in repetitions. The same tasks, the same silences, the same wind at your back, the same dust between your teeth. You return home before noon, your clothes damp with sweat and grime, your skin tingling from the sun. Inside, your mother is boiling water, and your youngest brother is rocking silently in the corner, eyes fixed on nothing. The house is quiet again, but not peaceful, just quiet. You wash your hands in a basin of gray water, and the mud that runs off them is the same color as the air outside. You dry them on a towel that never really dries. You sit at the table again. You wait. Maybe lunch will be better. The sun is higher now, but the warmth it brings is not comforting. It's dry and biting, not a blanket, but a breathless pressure that builds as the day unfolds. You feel it on your neck, behind your ears, across the backs of your hands as you work. By this hour, the world around you has already begun to settle into its daily rhythm of quiet endurance. Each person wrapped in the same thick blanket of fatigue and necessity. The wind never stops. It drones like an old memory that refuses to fade. You step back from the fence post you've been tending, letting the hammer rest at your side. The wood is splintered, and the barbed wire is rusting. Everything feels like it's slowly collapsing. Better to keep your mind anchored in the next small task, the hinge on the barn door that sticks, the feed sacks that need folding, the broken pail that might still hold if you patch it with wire and prayer. As you walk the edge of the field, you glance at the soil once again, the same soil your grandfather once called rich, and your father once called ours. Now it's dry as chalk, brittle underfoot, shifting like flour whenever the wind lifts. Just dust. You rub your fingers together and brush them on your pants. Even the stains don't change, just different shades of brown, layered by years of the same. The silence is deceptive. It isn't peace. It's a kind of hush that grows out of exhaustion. Your neighbor's fields are no better than yours. Some have tried different seed. Others just gave up, letting the weeds take over. A few planted again this year, despite the odds, because doing nothing felt worse. But nothing came up. Not really. Maybe a few shoots, thin and yellow, like the ghost of a harvest. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. This land isn't dead, exactly. It just doesn't want to live anymore. You remember the conversations that used to happen out here. Your father walking beside you, pointing out where the beans would go, where to rotate the wheat, how to stack the hay without letting it rot. That was years ago. He doesn't talk much now. He sits in the chair on the porch when he's not fixing machinery that doesn't run or looking at tools that have nothing to mend. His hands are as worn as the tools themselves, calloused, spotted, swollen in the joints. They don't hold as tightly as they once did, but they still carry memories, and that's the worst part. They remember when things worked, when the soil responded to sweat. Back at the house, the wind has pushed a new layer of dust against the doorframe, piling it like snowdrifts. You knock your boots together before stepping inside, though it makes little difference. Even your mother's sewing, what little she still does, is dusted over by lunchtime. She keeps a cloth near the window, wiping it every few hours, but the wind always wins. Always. It sneaks in through nail holes and warped boards, through the chimney flue and the crack in the floor where the boards have begun to bow. The house breathes dust as steadily as you do. The baby's crying now, not the loud, urgent cry of hunger, but the low, restless whimper of a child whose stomach is never quite full and whose lungs are always irritated. And the warmth of her small body reminds you that not everything has been stripped away. Not yet, but she's thin, too thin. And your mother's face, when she looks at the empty can of powdered milk on the shelf, tells you she knows it too. There is no more, and no money for more. Lunch is a repeat of breakfast, with slight variations depending on what's left. Today, it's a bit of sorghum syrup drizzled over dry biscuits. The biscuits are hard from sitting out overnight, and the syrup is gritty at the bottom, but it goes down better than nothing. No one says much. Your younger brother stares at the ceiling, following a trail of ants that have found their way inside. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because you're trying to stretch it. There's something humiliating about finishing too quickly, about looking at your empty plate while others are still eating. It draws attention, and no one wants attention here. The meal ends with the usual silence. No plates scraped clean, there's nothing to scrape. No seconds offered there, never are. You gather the dishes, wash them in a basin of cold water that's already cloudy from the last rinse, and set them out to dry. You pause at the window and look out. The horizon is a straight line, as though the world itself had been ironed flat. Trees are rare here. Those that haven't died have shrunk inward, like they're trying to escape their own roots. The fields beyond the yard stretch out like a quilt that's lost all its color. The wind moves across them in waves, but there's nothing to bend or break, just the illusion of movement. You think of the trains that used to pass through town. You haven't heard one in days, weeks, maybe. The lines are still there, but the whistle, once a comfort, once a reminder that other places still existed, has gone quiet. In the afternoon, you return to the barn. The tools are lined up against the wall, a few of them rusted beyond use. The plow hasn't been touched in days. There's nothing to turn over, no reason to run it, but you polish the blade anyway, not for use, but for memory. The scent of oil and old metal fills the space. It's almost pleasant, if only because it's different from the dust. You imagine the hands that held these tools before you, your fathers, your uncles, your grandfathers. You wonder if they felt this same quiet despair, or if they believed the land would always provide. There's a story your father used to tell about the spring rains that came the year he was born, how the fields were so full of life that the corn grew tall enough to hide a horse, how people danced in the streets when the harvest came in, when the grain elevators were full and the stores gave out samples just to draw in customers. He tells that story less now, not because he's forgotten, but because remembering makes the silence afterward too heavy. You want to believe in that story. But the land you see now doesn't look like it's ever known joy. The light begins to change. The sun sinks lower, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the earth. You feed the mule again, check her hooves, brush her back with the soft end of a broom. She doesn't move much. Her eyes follow you, dull but present. You wonder if she knows what's happening, if animals feel hopelessness or just hunger. She nuzzles your sleeve, maybe by habit, maybe out of affection. You don't pull away. Dinner will be beans, if the pot's not empty. Maybe a few carrots from the cellar, wrinkled and pale, but edible. Your mother will pretend it's a feast, and you'll sit with your siblings, eat slowly, and let the darkness creep in. The lamp will burn low. The matches are almost gone. The air inside will feel thicker, like the house itself is sighing. Before bed, you'll wipe your face with a damp cloth, brush your teeth with a pinch of baking soda, and climb back into the same bed, under the same thin quilt, with the same dust settling across your pillow. You'll hear the wind, always the wind. You'll taste the grit in your mouth again, and your last thought before sleep will be the same as your first when you wake. Another day, another morning, exactly the same, and still you will rise. Because even misery, when repeated enough, becomes a kind of rhythm, and rhythms, however cruel, have their own comfort. The sun has fully emerged by now, though it offers little in the way of warmth or clarity. It hovers behind the thin veil of airborne soil, casting a strange amber light across the landscape, as if the sky itself has turned the color of old parchment. It isn't beautiful. It's hazy, strained, and somehow artificial, like the sun is performing its role out of obligation rather than purpose. You blink against it as you step outside once more. The wind never stopped. It never does. There is no formal start to the workday, no whistle or bell. It begins when the bodies rise, and it ends when those bodies can no longer move. You shovel dust. You fix what can be fixed, even if you know it will break again tomorrow. You walk the edge of fields that haven't grown anything real in years. You make lists in your head of things that need repair, things you might find time for later. But there is no later. There is only this long stretch of daylight where the hours are indistinguishable from one another, one endless afternoon blurred into the next. You start with the chicken coop. There are only 4 hens left. They barely lay anymore, and the eggs, when they come, are misshapen and pale. Still, they are worth tending. The coop door sticks in the warped frame, and you have to shove your shoulder against it to open it wide enough to slip in. Inside, the air smells of old straw and ammonia. The floor is coated in dry droppings and loose feathers. You sweep what you can, but there's no fresh hay to replace the bedding. You just rotate it, shifting the old with the older, and hope the smell eases by evening. You collect 2 eggs miraculously unbroken and place them gently into your shirt pocket. One of them is warm. You think about giving it to your mother, but you already know it will be divided 5 ways by dinner. You consider the absurdity of fighting over something so small, and yet hunger makes even the tiniest things feel like treasures. You step out into the sunlight again, brushing your hands on your trousers. The wind pushes against you as you walk, kicking dust up around your boots. The sky has grown darker toward the west, and you know what that means. Not rain, never rain, but another dust storm. You make your way toward the fence, where the barbed wire runs low and loose. The wind has pulled one of the corner posts out of place, and the gate has started to swing. You dig a new hole, hammer the post back in, and wrap the wire tight again. The motion is mechanical. Your muscles remember it better than your mind does. You don't think about what the fence is for anymore. There's nothing left to contain. No animals that need keeping. The land you mark off isn't worth protecting, but the lines matter. They remind you that something here still belongs to someone. Across the field, you see a dust devil rise, thin and wiry, spiraling upward like smoke from a dying campfire. It moves like it's searching for something, dancing in jagged, uncertain lines before dissolving into nothing. These are common now. People used to laugh at them, used to say they meant good luck or coming change. No one laughs anymore. The land is too dry to be funny. Your next task is the well. Again, the water has grown worse, the taste sharper and more metallic. You lower the bucket slowly, listening to the rope creak with age and fray. The splash is faint, doesn't fall far. You pull it back up, and the water is tinted slightly brown. You'll have to boil it again. If there's time, if there's wood, you carry the bucket back inside and set it on the counter, careful not to slosh it. A little lost is too much these days. Inside, your mother is washing clothes in the basin. There is only one bar of lye soap left, and she uses it sparingly, cutting slivers off with a knife like it's cheese. The water in the basin is already dark. She scrubs a shirt against the washboard with slow, determined movements. Her knuckles are red, her fingers swollen. She doesn't speak. There's nothing new to say. You nod as you pass and head back out. She won't ask for help. She knows there's work waiting elsewhere. Work that doesn't finish just because your body aches. You move to the shed next. It leans dangerously to one side. The roof is bowed in the middle, and one of the windows is shattered. You wedge a beam underneath the corner and prop it up. It probably won't hold long, but it makes you feel like you've done something. Inside the shed, tools hang in careful rows, their handles worn smooth. A broken scythe lies on the ground, the blade rusted and warped. You pick it up, run your hand along the edge, and shake your head. It's done for. Still, you place it back on the rack. It's better to pretend it might still be useful someday. In the field beyond the shed, the wind picks up. The dust rolls low across the earth, rising in sheets like a dirty tide. You pull your bandana over your nose, though it doesn't help much. You keep walking. You move rocks that have surfaced in the soil. Check the irrigation ditch's long dryand. Straighten a sagging row of tomato cages from last year. The soil beneath them is hard as brick, cracked in places where roots used to spread. You kneel and dig with your fingers, just to see. It crumbles into powder in your hand. By now, your shirt is soaked with sweat, and your throat burns from the dry air. You cough once, then again, tasting the metallic temps of grit. You reach for your canteen, but it's empty. You forgot to refill it after breakfast. You head back toward the house, your steps slower now, legs heavy, not from distance, but from repetition. The house is quiet again. The baby is asleep. Your mother has hung the damp clothes on a sagging line that runs from the porch to the barn. They flap gently in the wind, collecting dust before they even dry. You refill your canteen, gulping the water too fast, then refill it again. You splash some on your face, though the sensation is barely cooling. It dries before you even step away from the basin. Your father returns from town in the old truck. You hear the engine before you see it coughing and wheezing like it's breathing its last. He pulls up slowly, parks crooked, and climbs out without looking at anyone. His hat is pulled low, his coat hangs loose. He carries a small sack too small for what you hoped. You meet him at the porch. He doesn't speak, just hands the bag to your mother and walks around to the back of the house. The bag holds flour, a tin of salt, a single onion, no sugar, no coffee, no meat. The store won't offer credit anymore. The bank sent another notice. He didn't open it. You watch as your father takes a seat on the back step. He lights a cigarette, the last from the packet he's folded and unfolded a dozen times. He smokes it slowly, like it's the only thing he owns that won't turn to dust. You don't interrupt. You just sit on the front step and watch the wind carry away another sliver of your field. Inside, your mother begins to prepare dinner. She moves slowly, carefully, measuring each cup, each handful. She slices the onion thin, like it needs to stretch across 5 plates. She doesn't speak, either. No one does. Even the baby seems to understand the weight of silence. You look out at the horizon again. Another cloud is forming, taller now, tinged with brown and gray. It's coming fast. The windows rattle. The birds have disappeared. You call out to your brother and begin tying the blankets over the windows. You've done it a dozen times, maybe more. The gaps in the frame are stuffed with old cloth. The door is bolted. You help gather the animals, what few remain, and bring them inside the barn. You tie the mule. The hens stay huddled in the corner, too tired to protest. When the storm hits, it comes like a heavy sigh, not sudden, not violent, but full of weight. The sky turns orange, then red, then black. The dust presses against the house like a blanket of earth being laid gently over everything. It finds its way in, no matter how carefully you've prepared. It coats your tongue, your skin, your breath. You close your eyes and listen. It's not thunder you hear. It's the sound of fine particles scraping against wood, tapping glass, moving through the air like whispers. You sit on the floor with your back to the wall, breathing shallowly through the cloth over your face. The others sit near you, wrapped in their own silence. It's not fear you feel, it's familiarity. This has happened before. It will happen again. When the storm passes, it leaves a new layer of dust on everything. You'll clean it or not. You'll brush it off the dishes, the clothes, the windowsill. You'll light the lamp if there's oil. You'll eat what's been made. You'll chew slowly. You'll sleep if your lungs allow. And tomorrow you'll rise, because there are still fences to mend, still dust to shovel, still tools to repair, still hope that the bank forgets you exist, and always, always, still wind. The next morning arrives not with a rooster's crow, but with the gentle creak of old timbers and the tap of sand against the window pane. The wind has shifted, but it hasn't stopped. You wake slowly, not because you're rested, but because sleep has slipped away again, like it always does, uneven, shallow, broken by coughing or the sound of someone shifting beneath a shared quilt. Your body aches in familiar ways, not sharp pain, but that dull, grinding stiffness that comes from repetitive labor and too few calories. It's an ache you've stopped noticing, just part of the background noise of being alive. The first step outside is always tentative. You open the door cautiously, expecting the worst, hoping for nothing, and prepared for both. There's a crust of fine grit across the porch, piled in small drifts like snow. Only it brings no coolness, no softness, no joy. The sun is out, technically, but it casts a murky glow, a tired gold that barely cuts through the haze. There's no dew, no bird call, no smell of greenery. The world smells like rust and dryness. Your hands are chapped, your lips are cracked, your nails are dark with embedded soil that hasn't washed out in weeks. The soap is nearly gone. You consider not using it today, saving the sliver for something more important, though you don't know what that might be. You think about how much soap used to cost a nickel, maybe less. Now it might as well be ivory. You check the list in your head. Every morning there's a mental roll call of chores, things that haven't changed in months but still must be named, as though saying them aloud gives them some purpose. Fix the chicken wire, check the roof tiles, mend the well crank, repack the saddlebag, sift the flour barrel, see if there's anything to grind, reseal the back window, patch the barn roof again. There is always something more to do, but never anything new. The work is repetitive. You climb onto the barn roof with a handful of bent nails, a hammer, and strips of worn canvas. The shingles are curled and brittle. You've used everything from old flour sacks to bits of linoleum to cover the holes. The linoleum was once part of the kitchen floor. Now the kitchen has bare boards, and the roof still leaks when the wind is bad enough to push the dust sideways. You think about how many days have gone into this barn, how many boards have been replaced, how many beams rebraced with scavenged nails. None of it is building anything. You're not improving. You're just keeping collapse at bay, one more day at a time. You know the shape of every knot in the wood, every bend in the roof. You lie on your stomach, stretch across the frame, and hammer the new patch in place. Your palms sting from splinters. Your knees ache from pressure. The sun beats down, but the breeze keeps it from feeling hot. It's a strange kind of cruel. The wind cools your skin while robbing your life. Back on the ground, you head to the tool shed again. There's a rake with a cracked handle, and you think you might be able to reinforce it with wire. There's no glue, no new handles to be had. Your hands know how to make do. You sit in the doorway where there's light and wrap the wire slowly around the split shaft, tying it off with a pair of pliers that have lost their spring. You feel like one of the tools, yourself bent, dulled, useful in the way that old things are useful only because there's nothing else around. Your younger brother comes to you with a question about the fence. One of the posts out near the west edge has come down again. You nod, pick up the hammer, and the two of you head out together. You don't speak much, but it's better to work with someone than alone. He's still young, 12 maybe, but the sharpness in his eyes is fading. He walks like someone older, already weighed down. The fence is no worse than you expected. You push the post back upright, jam rocks around the base, and wrap the wire tight again. He holds the tension while you hammer. You both know it will come loose again soon. On the way back, you pass the field where the wheat once grew. It's fallow now, but the rows are still faintly visible, like scars in the earth. You remember planting that wheat. Remember the sound of the mule's hooves, the feel of the plow handles. You still walk past it, as though maybe something will come back, if only out of habit. You break for a drink at the well. The water level seems lower. Your father said last week it might be time to deepen the shaft. But the tools needed for that aren't here. The money isn't here. It would be another impossible task, stacked atop all the other impossible tasks. You don't talk about it anymore. You just drink carefully. You rinse your face. You stare into the bucket and listen to the slosh of your reflection moving under the surface. Lunch is a biscuit again, hard, nearly flavorless. But there is a spoonful of molasses, the last of the jar. Your mother serves it in silence, portioning it with a careful hand. No one asks for more. You sit with your family around the table and pretend this is enough. You chew slowly. You keep your eyes down. There's no shame in hunger anymore. There's just tiredness. After lunch, you climb up into the attic. There's an old trunk there that needs going through. Maybe something can be sold, or traded, or burned for fuel. Inside are clothes from when you were smaller, shirts with intact buttons, socks with holes, too large, too darn, an old Bible. You remember when it played. You wind it once, but nothing happens. Still, you hold onto it for a few minutes, like it might come back to life if you only believe hard enough. Later, you haul some broken tools into the barn to sort. A scythe blade that snapped, a shovel with a cracked head, a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You stack them in the corner beside other broken things, fragments of your family's former usefulness, collected like bones in a quiet graveyard. Not because they might be repaired, but because getting rid of them would be admitting they're gone forever. You wipe sweat from your brow. You notice your fingernails again. Dust has stained them permanently. Your skin is dry and flaking at the knuckles. The wind has picked up once more, and the air smells like static. You see your mother pulling laundry off the line, half of it still damp, now coated in more dust than when she hung it out. She folds it anyway, brushing it off, piece by piece, as if denial could somehow make the wind kinder. The afternoon stretches out like an old dog in the sun, slow, indifferent, endless. You repair a shutter on the back of the house, nail a board over a crack in the wall, gather the eggs from the coop, though none have come today. You check on the mule, feed the chickens, stir the ash in the stove. You keep busy because stopping feels like sinking. As the light begins to fade, you notice the quiet deepening. The wind slows just a little, and in that stillness you can hear your own breath again. The animals settle down. Your father is sharpening a knife on the porch, not for anything specific, just because it's something to do. The knife won't see meat for weeks, maybe longer, but its edge matters. It reminds him he's not helpless, that tools can still be ready, even if there's nothing to use them on. Dinner comes, and it's thinner than the night before, but no one comments. You all sit around the same table, chewing slowly, the scraping of spoons, the only sound. Your sister hums under her breath, a lullaby from when you were younger. Your mother closes her eyes. She doesn't cry. No one cries anymore. The tears stopped months ago, dried up like the creeks and the crops. You finish your bowl and set it aside. Later, as you lie in bed again, the ceiling above you seems to pulse with shadow. The wind whistles against the walls, and the house responds with its own creaks and sighs. Your sibling stirs beside you, murmuring in a half-dream. You think about what tomorrow will bring, but the answer is already known. The same fence, the same dust, the same broken tools and patched roof, the same bank notices you'll try not to read, the same prayers, whispered without expectation. You close your eyes. You try to breathe shallowly. You try not to cough. You listen to the stillness. And eventually, sleep does come, not with peace, but with surrender. The body gives in, and the mind follows. Because no matter what, tomorrow always returns. And with it, another endless day. The sun was already up when it happened. A sky of burnished copper stained by the fine veil of ever-settling dust, stretched in all directions over a land that had forgotten what it meant to bloom. It was a morning like many others still, wind-hollowed and heavy with expectation that never quite ripened into hope. The mule was lying down again, though she'd risen with you for the last 14 years without fail. That was the first sign. And you knew, even before you stepped out onto the porch, even before the breeze licked its grit across your face and the boards creaked underfoot, that this morning would not end like the others. You approach the barn slowly, boots silent in the silt-soft dirt. Inside, the air hangs dense with warmth and the scent of old straw, mildew, and manure. You call her name softly, not because you think it will help, but because habits die slow. She doesn't lift her head. Her flanks rise and fall with shallow effort, and her eyes track you, but she doesn't try to stand. The ground around her is damp, darker than the rest, as if the earth itself had drawn close to her body in mourning. You crouch beside her, pressing your hand against her shoulder, feeling the tremble of breath beneath the skin. She's warm, she's present, but you can tell she's leaving. The mule had been part of everything. She pulled the plow through the stony, reluctant fields. She hauled fence posts, hay bales, broken tools. She bore the weight of your family's expectations long after the land had given up answering them. There's a rope still tied to the hook where her harness used to hang, frayed at the ends and unused for months now. The plow itself sits in the corner of the barn, rusting and half covered in an old tarp. You remember the last time you hitched her to it. You were hoping the rains would come. They didn't, and since then there's been no sense in trying. Your father joins you in silence. He stands in the doorway for a long moment before stepping in. The dust from his boots settles slowly in the quiet. He kneels beside you, and together you sit with the mule as her breath becomes slower, fainter, almost imperceptible. No one speaks. Words feel too heavy, too sharp against the softness of this farewell. Her eyes remain open, not from fear, but from exhaustion. You stroke the side of her face with fingers dry and cracked from years of labor. Her ear twitches once, and then she stills. The barn doesn't change. The chickens cluck faintly in the coop across the yard. A shutter bangs against the side of the house. Somewhere far off, a neighbor's dog barks, then quiets. But something has shifted inside of you. There's a line you didn't know you were standing near, and now you've crossed it. The mule was the last working animal, the final connection between man and land, between past and present. Without her, there is only you on the wind. You bury her behind the barn, near the place where the wild grass still grows in thin, brittle tufts. The earth is hard, even with the shovel, and every scoop is a reminder of what's gone. Your younger brother helps, though he doesn't say much. He's quiet in that way children become when the world teaches them silence too early. When the hole is deep enough, you lower her in gently, wrapping her in a worn woolen blanket once used in the winter storms. It was the best you had. It feels wrong, somehow, to part with it, but right too. She carried your family's burdens. It's the least she deserves. Afterward, you wash your hands in the basin by the porch. The water turns gray. You don't change your shirt. The dust clings, just like always. You sit on the steps for a long time. Your father lights a cigarette. Your mother brings out a tin cup of water and places it beside you without speaking. Everyone moves more slowly, not because they're tired, though they are, but because grief adds weight to even the smallest motions. And out here, there's no room for loud mourning, no rituals, no time for it. You just carry on, as you always have. Only now, something essential is gone. In the afternoon, the sky grows darker not from weather, but from something more subtle and permanent. A shift in mood, in rhythm. You walk the length of the fence line again, as though the day hasn't changed, as though the death of your mule didn't alter the very structure of your reality. You see the furrows in the dry soil where she once walked. You spot the groove in the yard where her tether dragged when she paced. You notice the worn patch near the water trough where she used to stand waiting. These ghosts are louder than words. They speak in absence. You try not to think about the plow. You try not to think about how you'll move the feed sacks, the water barrels, the broken lumber that needs hauling. There is no machine to help. The truck barely runs. Gasoline is too dear. Even if the truck could haul, there's nothing to haul for. No crops, no goods to bring to market. The market, if it still exists, has little use for you. The bank doesn't care. It wants money, not excuses. And now, one of your last remaining excuses has slipped away under a quilt of dust and silence. Inside the house, your mother prepares supper in quiet ceremony. She uses the smallest pot, fills it with water, adds a handful of lentils and what might have once been dried onions. She stirs it with a worn wooden spoon and hums a hymn from her own childhood, her voice thin and wavering, like a candle flickering in a draught. The scent that rises from the pot is faint, but it fills the small kitchen with a kind of aching familiarity. You all eat in silence again, not because there's nothing to say, but because everything that needs saying is already written on your faces, in the lines around your eyes, in the way your hands rest on the table without purpose. That evening, you sit in the barn again, not working, just sitting. The light filters in through the gaps in the walls, golden and dusty, like memory itself. The silence here is different now. It used to be full of presence, the soft thud of hooves, the snort of warm breath, the scrape of a feeding bucket. Now it is just quiet. You wonder if you will ever hear those sounds again, if this land will ever answer you again. You wonder what comes next. You pick up a coil of rope and run it through your fingers. It's coarse and dry, the same rope you use to tie the harness, the same rope you used this morning. It smells of sweat and sun and time. You hang it back on the nail. You pick up a rusted horseshoe, one of her last. You turn it over in your hand, and it feels heavier than it should. You place it on the shelf and walk outside into the dimming light. The wind is low now, a rare moment of stillness. You walk the perimeter of the yard. You check the door hinges, the window slats, the root cellar latches, not because you expect anything to change, but because that's what you do. You tend to what's left. You hold onto the shape of routine, even as the purpose slips away. Night falls slowly, and the stars, when they appear, are dim and flickering behind the haze. You lie in bed and close your eyes, but the image of her stillness, her warmth will not leave you. You think about the first day she came to the farm. You were just a child then. She was strong, she was steady, she was everything the land was supposed to be. Now she's gone, and the land has grown quieter still. The next morning arrives with a quiet so deep it feels like the air itself has stopped breathing. There is no mule to feed, no movement in the barn, no sound of hooves brushing straw. You rise and dress without thinking. out of habit more than intention. But as you open the door and step outside, the weight of her absence greets you more firmly than any sunrise. The yard seems larger now, emptier, the space behind the barn too still. You half expect to see her standing there, ears twitching, waiting for water, for work, for the steady rhythm of another day. But of course, there's nothing. And the nothing feels louder than any cry. At breakfast, no one says it aloud, but everything is different. The food tastes the same meaning. It doesn't taste like much at all. A few spoonfuls of cornmeal, stretched with water and boiled into a pale paste. Your mother sets it on the table with mechanical precision, portioned into bowls that have long since lost their gloss. The baby coughs once, weakly, then rests her head against your mother's chest. Your brother asks if he should feed the mule. Your mother tells him no, softly. Then there's quiet, the kind that hovers, not because there's peace, but because something has been taken. You head outside, carrying the same tools you always do: hammer, nails, wire. A bucket of coarse feed that has no recipient now. You pause at the barn, glance inside. You stand in the doorway longer than you mean to, staring at the empty stall. The floor is undisturbed. There's no soft pawing of hooves, no breath fogging the air, no curious gaze from under heavy lids. You walk inside anyway. You pick up the harness, now limp and unnecessary, and hang it on the peg. It sways slightly, like it remembers movement, like it remembers usefulness. The plow remains in the corner, still rusting. You crouch beside it and run a cloth over the blade, though there's no reason to clean it now. Without the mule, it's no more than a relic. You think about pulling it by hand. People have tried that before. Desperation does that. But you know what the soil is like. You've felt it resist even iron. You've seen it choke life from seed. Pulling a plow through that would break your body long before it broke the earth. So you stand, stretch your back, and leave the barn. Mid-morning finds you in the tool shed again, sorting the broken from the barely usable. You set aside a few hand tools, hammers, a spade, a rusted handsaw that could be sharpened if you had the stone. You're thinking of trade. The thought comes reluctantly. These tools have belonged to your family for decades. Some of them bear notches and carvings, initials from another time. But sentiment is a luxury, and hunger has no patience for legacy. You consider walking to town. It's a half-day's journey on foot, longer if the wind picks up. The truck won't make it. The tires are soft, the fuel tank nearly dry. You pack a bundle of small items tools, a few glass jars, some old fabric, nothing you can't live without, but things you hope someone might still find value in. You don't expect money. No one deals in coins now. It's barter, mostly salt, soap, coffee grounds. Once, you got a sack of beans for an old radio. The radio hadn't worked in years. You set out before noon. The sky above is still that same flat beige, blurred by the ever-present dust. The wind is light for now, brushing along the ground in a way that raises the thinnest curtain of motion. You tie a cloth around your face and walk. The land stretches on both sides of the dirt road, silent, cracked, featureless. Fences lean in the wind. Abandoned farmsteads sit slumped against the horizon like fallen giants. You pass one with its windows boarded, its porch caved in. A few chickens scatter behind a collapsed rain barrel. You wonder who left them behind, or if they simply refused to die. You pass another travel, an older man, barefoot, with a sack over his shoulder and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. You nod. He nods. Nothing more is exchanged. Conversation takes energy, and you both look like people who have none to spare. He continues east, you continue west. By the time you reach town, the wind has picked up again. Dust swirls along the street in tight spirals. Shop windows are fogged with grit. There's not much left of town, now just a few open fronts, a dry goods store, a mechanic who mostly sells wire and wheels, and a general store with little on its shelves but tins with faded labels and jars of pickled nothing. You step inside the store, the bell overhead giving a dull clink. The shopkeeper eyes your bundle and raises a brow. You lay the items on the counter one by one. The hammer, the carving knife, the half-used ball of thread, the spool of wire, the glass jar with a screw-top lid. He turns each in his hands, weighing them not for usefulness, but for trade potential. You watch his fingers dry, knuckled, deliberate as he sets aside what interests him. Eventually, he offers you a half-pound of flour and a small tin of lard. You nod, and the exchange is done. You don't linger in town. There's nothing here for you. The faces you pass are gray with dust and weariness. Children sit on stoops with blank expressions. One boy kicks at a can, his toe dragging a trail in the dirt. You see a woman hanging laundry on a line behind a boarding house. The sheets are stiff with dust before they even rise. The journey home feels longer. Your legs move out of necessity, not strength. The sun angles low behind the haze. Shadows stretch across the land like arms, searching for something to hold. You walk until the sky begins to fade into an ashen dusk. At the top of the hill that overlooks your farm, you pause. The barn stands crooked, the house still. Smoke rises faintly from the chimney. You think of the baby, of your brother, of the meal your mother will stretch with the flour and lard you've bartered. You feel both pride and guilt. Pride for bringing something home. Guilt that it cost you so much. Dinner is simple. Biscuits made with water and lard, pan-fried until just browned. No salt, no herbs, but they are warm, they are real. Your family eats slowly, savors every bite like it might be the last. No one asks what you gave away, they understand. After the dishes are cleaned with a rag and a drop of reused water, you all sit in the still of the living room. Your father reads from a newspaper that's weeks old. The news is still the same. Dust, prices, drought, failure. Your mother rocks the baby. Your brother draws shapes on the floorboards with his finger. You step outside for a moment, into the cooling air. The stars are invisible tonight. The wind moans low across the plain. You walk to the edge of the barn and place a hand on the wall. Inside, there is no sound, no shifting, no breath. The stall is still empty, and it always will be. You close your eyes, and for a brief moment, you imagine her there again, standing, patient, ready. But when you open them, the doorway is dark. You turn back toward the house. The turning point has come. The mule is gone. The plow will rust. The field will lie bare. And now, all that remains is you. Morning arrives not with promise, but with inertia. The sun filters through the same pale brown haze, casting a dim light that does little to warm the rooms of your tired home. The air, thick with dust and resignation, sits heavy on every surface on the warped wooden table where breakfast bowls rest, on the cracked window panes that rattle faintly in the breeze, and in the hollows beneath your mother's eyes as she lifts a dented kettle from the stove with hands that never stop moving. It's a morning like all the others, and that's precisely what makes it feel heavier than usual. a sameness that stretches on forever, like an echo that never fades. You rise slowly, every motion quiet, as though noise might shatter the fragile stillness that keeps the household from falling apart entirely. There is no rush, no one is truly waiting for you, and nothing urgent awaits, yet you move anyway. Your bones creak just a little more than yesterday. You dress in the same threadbare shirt and patch-mended trousers. You step out onto the porch, and the first breath of air tastes of dry timber and distance. The same wind that has been your companion and adversary for years now moves lazily across the yard, stirring dust devils into lazy spirals between the barn and the house. The sky, as ever, is without color. No blue, no white. Only a faint sepia smudge where the sun pretends to rise. From where you stand, you can see the outline of what was once the North Field. A cracked sea of dirt, now long abandoned, its furrows worn flat by time and wind. Beyond it, the horizon stretches in blurred tones of brown and gray. You've seen that view for so long, it stopped looking like failure and simply become fact. Inside, the family moves with practiced quiet. Your mother serves a breakfast of dry cornbread and boiled water, colored faintly with chicory. There is no real coffee. There hasn't been in over a year. The baby fusses briefly before settling into the curve of her mother's arm. Your brother eats slowly, gaze unfocused, tracing circles on the table with his spoon. Your father sits hunched, elbows on knees, a thin line between his brows as he chews in silence. It begins, as it so often does in these times, not with drama, but with absence. You notice it at breakfast, the gap in the seating arrangement, the coat still hanging by the door untouched, the boots missing from their usual place beside the threshold. Your cousin is gone. He left some time before dawn, taking with him a bedroll, a few biscuits wrapped in cloth, and the worn pack he kept beneath his cot. No note, no goodbye, just the quiet shift in air that comes when someone leaves and means not to return. You remember him talking about California, about fields full of fruit, about work for anyone with strong hands and an empty stomach. He'd heard stories from travelers passing through, dusty men who spoke of labor camps, picking lines, and trucks that came at sunrise to haul the willing into rows of tomatoes or peaches or cotton. None of it sounded easy, but it sounded like something. And something, out here, has become the most precious of all commodities. You step outside after breakfast and find your father sitting on the edge of the porch, holding a tin cup of water in his hands, staring at the horizon. He doesn't mention the departure. He doesn't need to. It's become part of the rhythm. People go, people vanish. Sometimes they leave footprints. Sometimes they leave nothing at all. The only real question now is how many will remain. Later that morning, you pass the old water barrel near the barn and catch sight of your neighbor walking down the road. He's got his son beside him, a lanky boy with knotted hair and a pack slung over one shoulder. The boy looks back as they pass, and you nod to each other, two strangers sharing the quiet understanding of those left behind. You watch them walk until they disappear around the bend, their silhouettes swallowed by dust and distance. Another set of feet moving west. Inside, the house feels emptier than it did before. Even though the number of people is only slightly smaller, the atmosphere has changed, as if one absence somehow echoes into all the rooms. Your mother hangs laundry in the yard shirts, so thin they flutter like paper in the breeze. Your brother tends to the stove, stirring a pot of beans with a wooden spoon worn smooth by years of use. The baby sleeps quietly in her basket, her breath soft and rhythmic beneath a thin quilt. Your father spends the afternoon sharpening tools, not because there's work for them, but because it keeps his hands occupied. The axe head is pitted and dull. The sickle's handle is cracked, but he works each one carefully, methodically, as if their readiness might summon opportunity by sheer force of will. The motions are familiar, the outcomes are unchanged, but still he sharpens. You take a walk out to the fields before dusk. The soil crumbles underfoot. It's dry in a way that seems permanent, like it's forgotten how to receive rain. The irrigation ditches are empty channels now, carved into the land like scars. You pass by the old scarecrow, still standing in the center of the south field, its coat flapping in the breeze like a flag over a forgotten battlefield. You don't remember the last time crows visited. You find yourself looking west more often now, toward the road that curves gently out of sight, toward the invisible thread that others have followed. You wonder what it feels like to be moving, not running, not escaping, but simply walking, letting the road stretch out and carry you somewhere else, somewhere where the air might smell like green things, somewhere where the silence isn't so loud. That night, you overhear your parents speaking in hushed voices. Your mother's tone is calm, but there's an edge to it, a tremor beneath the quiet. She's talking about her sister, your aunt, who hasn't written in weeks, about the parcels that no longer come, about the neighbor who left and never sent word. Your father answers in short murmurs. There's nothing to say. Everyone is doing the same calculation now. Stay, and maybe wither slowly. Leave, and risk the unknown. There is no promise either way, only the slow, grinding movement of consequence. One morning, the wind changes direction. You notice it immediately. The dust comes from the north, now colder, heavier. It coats the window panes differently. The light seems more brittle, a sign, perhaps, though of what you aren't sure. That afternoon, your uncle walks out with nothing more than a hat and a satchel. He says nothing to anyone. He steps off the porch and doesn't look back. Your aunt watches from the doorway, her hands clenched together. The screen door creaks behind her as she closes it softly. The following days blur together. Meals become thinner. Time stretches out, each hour soft and indistinct. Your brother finds an old harmonica and tries to play it, though the sound it makes is cracked and mournful. He stops after a few minutes and stares at it, turning it over in his hands like it might contain answers. You sit beside him on the porch. You don't speak, but your shoulders rest against one another, and for a moment it feels like enough. Your dreams are different now. Not frantic or loud, but hollow. You walk through fields of ash. You sit at tables where everyone's face is missing. You wander through houses that belong to people you no longer remember. When you wake, the dreams cling like spiderwebs, invisible but present, caught in your eyelashes, your breath, your throat. The family changes shape, not dramatically, but gradually, like erosion. Your mother begins spending more time alone. Your father sleeps longer, his cough worsening with each passing week. The baby cries more often. Your brother stops drawing in the dust. One night, you find him sitting behind the barn, his knees pulled to his chest, staring up at a sky so faint it barely holds stars. You sit with him until he falls asleep, then carry him back inside. Eventually, your mother begins packing a small case, just in case, she says. A bundle of cloth diapers, a can of condensed milk, a letter written but not sealed. You don't ask where she might go or when. You understand. You've started packing one yourself, quietly, beneath the bed. A blanket, a worn book of psalms, a folded map, though most of the roads have long since disappeared beneath dust and disuse. And still, the wind blows. Each day, a little more of the family fades. Each week, someone else slips away, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Those who stay seem dimmer, quieter, less themselves, and those who go vanish into rumor, postcards, and stories passed along by travelers. There are no guarantees, no safe routes, no certainty, only the question that lingers on every breath. How long do you hold on, and what, exactly, are you holding on to? You look across the fields one more time and realize you no longer expect them to bloom. You just wait for who's next to disappear. The days move differently now, not faster or slower, just less distinctly. They no longer rise and fall like tides. Instead, they flatten into one another, a ceaseless rhythm of sameness, marked only by the faintest shift in wind direction or the thinning of a meal. The dust, ever present, forms a kind of skin over everything: the windows, the well handle, the clothes on your back, even the memories of how things used to be. When you speak of the past now, it feels like talking about a place that existed on another planet or in someone else's dream. The house has become quieter, not empty exactly, but hushed in a way that suggests something essential has left the room and not come back. There are still voices, but they rarely rise above a murmur. Still footsteps, but more often in solitary pairs than bustling groups. When people do speak, it's in practical terms: where to find the sewing needle, how much flour is left, whether the old water barrel still leaks. Conversations used to drift around the room with ease, carried on the warm air of hope. Now they settle quickly, like ash. Some of the furniture has gone missing. At first it was the things nobody really needed: the tall back chair your uncle never used, the chipped teacups from your grandmother's trunk, a lamp with a cracked base. Each item quietly bartered away for food or fabric or something that might be useful when the hard part really began. The hard part, of course, is already here, but no one says that aloud. The baby is thinner. She eats when there is food, sleeps most of the day. Your mother carries her less now, partly out of exhaustion, partly because she has begun to suspect what might be coming. She still sings lullabies in the evenings, soft and slow, but sometimes the melody falters midway through. Her voice fades, not because she forgets the words, but because she no longer believes them. Your father rises later each day, his cough now a regular punctuation to the silence. He still tries to mend the barn door when it falls loose, still sharpens the sickle, though he hasn't used it in months. The motions give him something to grip, a routine to brace himself against, but his strength wanes with each sunrise. The lines in his face have deepened. At night, he often sits near the stove, with his eyes closed, listening to the sound of the wind moving across the roof, and you suspect that he is listening not just to the wind, but to time itself blowing past him. Your younger brother has become a figure of silence. Once prone to chatter and questions, he now moves through the house like a wisp of breath, appearing and disappearing with the light. He carves small shapes from scrap wood and buries them in the yard, small grave markers for things he cannot name. You once caught him whispering to one of the fence posts, as though it might answer. When you asked what he was doing, he looked up and said, "They need someone to remember them." Then he went back to digging. Sometimes you pass him in the yard and wonder if he's still here entirely, or if part of him left with the mule, or your cousin, or the crops. It's hard to say. He's always been quiet, but this silence feels different, like a room sealed too long. Your aunt sits in her chair by the window, staring out at the barn, where the paint peels in long strips like old paper. Her hands rest on her knees, unmoving. She no longer asks about your uncle. His coat still hangs on the hook, but she never touches it. Some days she doesn't speak at all. You bring her food when you can, a crust of bread or a spoonful of beans, and place it on the table beside her. Sometimes she eats it. Sometimes she just looks at it for a while, then turns her face back to the window. And through it all, the land remains unchanged, relentlessly barren. The earth, once full of promise and toil and sweat, now lies indifferent beneath your feet. It no longer offers resistance when you step on it, no longer pushes back when you dig. It is brittle, cracked, hollowed. When you press your palm into it, it leaves no trace, no impression, as if it too has forgotten how to remember. You find yourself staring west more often. At night, you sit on the porch and trace the sky with your eyes, looking for a star that might mean something. Most nights, the sky is blank, just a blur of shadow and dust. But now and then, one faint light shines through, and you imagine your cousin looking up at the same star from a stranger's field, his hands raw from harvest, his back sore from bending. You wonder if he ever thinks of you, of this porch, of the last meal he had here. If he misses the silence, or if he's finally found a place where it's different. Not better, necessarily, but different. In town, when you make the long walk to barter for what little is left on the shelves, the faces are changing. New ones arrive, men with hollow eyes, mothers holding the hands of children who no longer speak. Others are missing. The shopkeeper who once greeted you with a nod now stares past you, his ledger untouched. The woman who traded eggs for soap now begs at the door of the church, her face smudged with ash, her shawl pulled too tight for the heat. There are rumors. The trains are more crowded. The camps are overflowing. Some say the West has no more room. Others claim new towns are rising, that the Red Cross is coming, that the president himself is building houses. None of it feels true, but none of it feels false either. Rumors have become the only stories people can still afford to tell. When you return home, you notice that the windmill has finally stopped turning. The last gust that kept it alive has fallen still. The silence it leaves behind is strange, an absence within the absence, like a candle snuffed in an already dark room. You stare at it for a long time, uncertain whether to fix it or bury it. In the end, you do neither. You simply watch. The family doesn't talk about leaving anymore, nor do they speak of staying. Those words feel too big, too sharp. Instead, they focus on the next step, the next meal, the next load of wood to bring in, the next letter to send. You write one yourself, to no one in particular, and tuck it into your pocket, just in case you find someone to give it to. You've begun to notice the walls more, the small cracks in the plaster, the way light filters through them at dusk. You run your fingers along the wood grain of the windowsill and find your initials carved there, small and faded. You don't remember when you did it. It must have been years ago, when hope still hummed in the floorboards. You trace them again, slowly, as if trying to bring the past forward. Some evenings, you walk the perimeter of the house 3, 4, 5 times, as if looking for something out of place. But nothing ever is. Everything is exactly where it has always been. And yet it all feels unfamiliar. The door creaks at the same place. The step wobbles like always. The chickens cluck in their pen, though fewer now. But there's a sense that something essential has moved on without you and left the body behind. You begin to dream of walking, not running, not fleeing, just walking alone westward through fields of wheat that have somehow survived. You pass people, but they do not speak. You pass towns, but they offer no shelter. You walk and walk and walk until the road becomes a blur beneath your feet and the sky a dome of gray above you. And when you wake, your boots are still by the door, covered in dust, waiting. You look at your hands. They're thinner, the lines deeper, the skin coarser. You flex your fingers and feel them creak. These are not the hands you remember. And you wonder how much more of yourself can vanish before you're no longer here at all. Still, you rise the next day. You mend a fence. You boil water. You sit by the window and watch the wind curl around the barn, slow and endless and patient. Some walk west, some stay and vanish, and some, like you, remain halfway between both, holding on to shadows and listening for a sign that never quite arrives. It begins with the wind. You are in the yard, leaning against the post where the clothesline used to hang before the rope frayed and snapped. There's nothing left to dry anymore. Not really no spare clothes, no fresh linens, nothing worth the effort of a line. But you still come here sometimes, out of routine more than purpose, watching the barn doors sway gently in their rusted hinges and listening to the sound the earth makes when there's nothing left to say. It is then, as you stand watching the horizon blur once again into windblown indistinction, that you hear a faint, hollow thud, distant, underground, and oddly deliberate. Not the sound of something breaking, not the sound of the barn groaning in the gust, but the muted echo of something falling beneath your feet. You walk toward the source, past the dry vegetable patch and the collapsed trellis where beans once clung in better seasons. They're half sunk behind the shed and nearly obscured by a drift of dust and rotting fence posts is the old cellar door. You had forgotten it was even there. No one's spoken of the root cellar in years, not since your uncle reinforced it, back when the last harvest still held promise and winters still meant something more than enduring hunger. But the storm that passed through last week, if one could call that mild whirlwind a storm, must have dislodged something, revealing the sagging door beneath a scattered veil of dried grass, boards, and leaves that never had the strength to fall green. The iron ring on the cellar door is stiff, coated in rust, and packed with grit, but you tug it free with both hands, and it lifts with a sound like old breath. Dust pours upward in lazy spirals, disturbed by air that has not stirred in years. The darkness inside is immediate and full. There's a smell one you haven't encountered in some time. Not rot exactly, but deep age. The scent of enclosed time, of paper, soil, and wood left too long without witness. You step carefully down the stone stairs, your boots making soft contact with the worn edges of each step. The air is cooler here, surprisingly so, and heavier with quiet. The lantern you carry doesn't throw much light, but it's enough to trace the shapes that remain. Old glass jars with pale, clouded contents, crates sagging under the weight of moldy canvas, tools long since surrendered to rust and cobwebs. And then, tucked near the back wall, beneath a collapsed box of dried husks, you find it a small wooden chest, warped by time but intact, its lid slightly ajar. You crouch beside it, brushing away years of silence with one careful hand. Inside, bundled tightly beneath layers of cloth, is a book. Not a ledger or farm journal, not something meant to tally or account, but a diary. The leather is cracked, its spine softened by dampness, but the pages within are mostly dry, the ink faded yet legible. You sit back against the cellar wall and begin to read, the lantern flickering in your periphery, the dust dancing like memory in the light. The handwriting is careful, though it becomes increasingly hurried over time. The first pages are dated nearly 10 years back, before the real droughts began, before the banks started claiming land with letters rather than chains. The voice in the diary is familiar in tone, but not in identity. It belonged to a woman, young perhaps, judging by her early entries, or simply hopeful in a way that youth allows. She wrote about planting schedules, about the first signs of blight in the corn, about the way her husband smiled when he came in from the fields, dirt streaking his brow, pockets full of seed. But as the pages turn, the voice changes. Slowly, at first, the tone darkens. Optimism fades not with a bang, but with a soft erosion. She writes of letters from the county, about water usage, restrictions, of meetings with other families, where nothing is decided except to wait and pray. She begins to describe the wind as a living thing, a thief with dry hands. She calls it once. It comes not to howl, but to take. Then comes the entry about her daughter. It's brief, just a few lines. The child had a cough, then a fever, then nothing. She went quiet yesterday. The writer notes, there was no strength left in her. We wrapped her in her favorite shawl and buried her beneath the cottonwood. There was no stone, only a handful of broken toys. You pause reading. Even though you knew it was coming, how could it not? The flatness of her grief is startling. There is no embellishment, no scream, just an inventory of loss. The entries that follow are more erratic. She writes about neighbors leaving, some in the night, some in groups. She describes walking past empty homes and seeing doors swinging open in the wind, the tables still set, as though the families had only stepped away for a moment. And then she begins to write about the voices. At first, she dismisses them, explains them away as tricks of the wind, as echoes bouncing down the chimney. But over time, she writes of conversations she hears when no one is around, of whispers that come from beneath the floorboards, from inside the well, from the corners of the barn. Not malevolent, she says, but persistent. They speak of leaving, always of leaving, of doors that open only for those who walk without looking back. You read on. One entry is stained with what looks like water damage, perhaps from the day the root cellar first leaked. But the ink is smeared in such a way that the pressure of her hand is still visible. She speaks of waking to find footprints in the dust inside her home. Small ones, child-sized, but her daughter was gone. She writes, I left out a piece of bread last night. This morning it was gone. I asked no questions. Later entries are almost poetic in their disarray. She writes less about crops and more about memory, how it twists in the heat, how it flutters like laundry not tied down. She writes about forgetting faces, about hearing her own name spoken in an unfamiliar voice, about feeling that the land itself is watching her, waiting for her to move. The final entry is only one sentence. I am leaving the rest here, so someone will know we were not always shadows. You close the diary slowly. The air in the cellar has grown colder, though you're not sure if that's truly physical or something felt in the chest, in the place where sorrow settles when it has nowhere else to go. You climb back up the stairs, diary in hand, your lantern casting a faint arc of light behind you. The wind greets you again at the tops, steady, familiar. It carries the scent of dust and dead grass and something else now. Perhaps the faintest hint of paper, ink, and voices long silent. Back in the house, you place the diary on the table. You don't read it aloud. You simply let your fingers rest on the cover, and the others understand. Your mother watches with tired eyes. Your brother reaches out, but doesn't touch it. The baby stirs in her sleep. The house, as quiet as ever, feels fuller somehow, as if someone else now sits in the room, unseen but remembered. The diary remains open that evening, its pages fluttering in the breeze from the open window, telling stories in silence to anyone willing to listen. And you realize this wasn't just a record of despair. It was a trace, a footprint, a reminder that even in the slowest unraveling, someone was there. Someone noticed. Someone remained long enough to write it down. You wonder, quietly, if someday someone will find something of yours, a carving on a wall, a scrap of fabric with your initials, a name etched in the underside of a drawer, some sign that you existed here once and tried to hold on. Night falls slowly, as it always does, no more like a dimming than a setting. The light doesn't disappear so much as retreat, step by step, into the corners of the land. Inside the house, the diary remains open on the table. No one has spoken of it since you brought it up from the root cellar, but it draws attention anyway. Every now and then, someone pauses by the table, rests a hand lightly near the spine, flips a page or two. Not reading, not yet, just ... feeling the presence of someone else's truth. Something that might be older than your own memory of this place, yet so intimate it feels like your own voice whispering back from the past. You sit beside it after dark, lantern lit. The room quiet except for the baby's soft breathing and the distant shuffle of your brother's footsteps as he moves about the porch. You turn the pages again, not from beginning to end this time, but skipping, drifting, letting your eyes land where they will. The woman's voice, once so careful and neat, grows more ragged the deeper you go. Her words scatter, the lines running longer, tighter, more tangled with emotion. She no longer tries to hold back. She writes about the rain that didn't come not just once, but year after year. She records the first time the well ran low, the day the pump stopped working, the decision to slaughter the last hog in spring because there was no grain left to feed it. And with each small loss comes a greater silence, not just in the land, but in her own family. Her husband stopped singing in the mornings. Her son began sleepwalking. Her neighbor stopped waving when he passed the gate. And then, deeper into the entries, she writes of the second child, a boy, barely 2, who developed a cough that never went away. She describes his weight, how he grew lighter each week, until holding him felt like holding a coat folded over itself. She speaks of carrying him into the root cellar on hot days to keep him cool, wrapping him in damp cloth and fanning him with pages from the Sears catalog. She writes of whispering stories to him, not fairy tales, but old memories, as if anchoring him to the world by repetition alone. He didn't survive the summer. There is no entry that announces his death. You piece it together from the way she stops mentioning him, from the change in her handwriting, from the silence that begins to stretch between the dates. A month goes by without a single note. then another. When she writes again, her voice is thinner, less anchored. She speaks of shadows that flicker where he used to sit, of lullabies that drift up from the floorboards when no one else is in the house. Not ghosts, exactly. She never calls them that. She refers to them as echoes, things that didn't get carried off by the wind. You close the diary again and sit with the stillness that follows. There is something different about the house now. Not heavier, but deeper, as if it contains more than just your family. As if the past has layered itself into the walls, the floorboards, the air you breathe. In the days that follow, you return to the root cellar again, not for food or shelter, but because it calls to you now, not in words, but in memory. There are other things buried there. You begin to unearth them one by one. A child's worn shoe with a broken strap, a bundle of letters tied with string, a corn-husk doll with one eye drawn in charcoal. Each item is its own kind of story unspoken, unrecorded, but no less real. You line them up on a shelf inside the cellar, one after the other, forming a kind of silent altar to those who endured this land before you. One afternoon, while sweeping out a corner of the cellar, you find a panel in the wall that shifts under pressure. Behind it, another space narrow, shallow, filled with more pages, wrapped in oilcloth, a second diary, or a continuation of the first. The handwriting is different, rougher, more frantic, possibly her husband's. He writes less often, and what he writes is harder to follow. But it's clear he was breaking in a different way. He speaks of watching his wife unravel, of burying a second child with his own hands, while she stood silent behind him. He confesses to things he cannot forgive himself, for bartering heirlooms for sacks of moldy grain, slaughtering their one remaining cow because there was no one left to milk it. He writes of hearing his daughter's voice in the orchard after she died. She asked me why I couldn't protect her, he says. I had no answer, only empty hands. His final entry is dated the day before the woman's last. It is simple, only 4 words. The roots won't hold. You return to the fields later that week, the pages still heavy in your thoughts. The earth is cracked and gray, a skin stretched too tightly across the bones of the land. You kneel and press your fingers into the dirt. It doesn't resist. It crumbles away, fine and dry. And you think of the roots, the ones this man wrote about, how they must have grasped at nothing, reaching into void. It's strange, the comfort you take from those diaries. Not because they promise hope, they don't. Not because they suggest a way out, they don't do that either. But because they prove that someone else bore this weight, that others stared out at the same dull horizon, felt the same wind, counted the same lost meals, and still put pen to page. It means your struggle is not invisible, that this suffering is not singular. One night, your brother finally asks about the book. You hand it to him in silence. He reads in bed, the lantern burning low beside him. You watch the way his eyes follow the lines, the way his brow furrows, the way he pauses on certain pages and returns to them, reading the words again and again. When he finishes, he says nothing. He simply places the diary back on the table and goes outside to sit beneath the stars. You join him a few minutes later. The night is unusually clear, the wind quiet for once, as if even it is listening. Your brother doesn't speak, but after a long while, he leans his head against your shoulder. I don't think they were crazy, he says finally. No, you whisper back. I don't think so either. You sit there until the cold settles in your bones, until the sky begins to lighten. And as the first dim light of dawn slides across the brittle fields, you understand something you hadn't before. This land isn't just a grave for crops and livestock and promises. It's a library of sorrow, a vault of buried clues, a place that remembers even when no one else does. The diary remains on the table, its pages slowly curling in the rising warmth of the sun, waiting for the next set of eyes, waiting for the next set of hands to carry its weight forward. A quiet voice speaking not into silence, but into time. And beneath it all, beneath the house, beneath your feet, the roots may not hold, but the memory does. Imagine yourself standing just beyond the worn porch steps of a weathered farmhouse. The earth cracked beneath your feet, and the pale light of dusk settling softly over the horizon. The sky, once bright and filled with the hopeful blue of spring, now carries a muted gray haze, as if the sun itself is reluctant to shine through the thick veil of dust that seems to cling to everything: the wooden beams of the house, the withered cornstalks, and even the clothes hung to dry, stiffened by grit. The air is heavy, dry and still, yet alive with a restless breath that moves faintly, just enough to stir the brittle grass at the edge of the field. As you gaze outward across the endless plains, your eyes catch the first sign of movement far in the distance: a slow, twisting spiral of dust rising from the cracked earth, turning like a ghostly ribbon caught in an invisible dance. This is a dust devil, a small whirlwind born from the sun-baked soil and the relentless heat, dancing lazily at first before gathering strength and spinning upward like a spiral staircase reaching toward the sky. To the untrained eye, it might seem nothing more than a curious, natural event, a brief swirl of dirt and leaves. But to the families who remain clinging to this land, to those who know the rhythms and the unspoken language of this harsh world, the dust devil is something far more significant. It is a messenger, a sign from the earth itself, a symbol woven into their beliefs and their daily rituals. Across generations, these farmers have come to see the direction and movement of dust devils as omens, silent conveyors of fortune or warning. When the swirling column spins clockwise, it is interpreted as a hopeful sign, an indication that the wind may soon bring rain, or that the stubborn ground might soften enough to yield a crop. The clockwise dance is seen as the earth's subtle nod toward mercy and renewal, a quiet promise whispered on the wind. But when the dust devil turns counterclockwise, the message is darker. It warns of coming hardship, the threat of blight, a failed planting season, or the loss of livestock to sickness or starvation. It is a sign to brace, to prepare, to steel oneself for days that will test the body and spirit. To see a counterclockwise dust devil is to feel the slow tightening of the earth's grip, an invisible tightening around every hope. Families gather in quiet groups to share these observations, comparing stories and old memories as the dust devils rise and fall across the landscape. These shared tales become a language of endurance, connecting the past to the present and offering a fragile sense of control in a world otherwise dictated by the unpredictable forces of nature. Beyond the fields and the dance of dust devils, the people of this land turn inward as night descends. Inside the dim glow of flickering lanterns, women sit together, mending clothes, sewing patches, and whispering stories handed down through generations. These stories are soft threads in the fabric of their lives, tales of spirits, protective charms, and rituals meant to keep darkness at bay. One such practice involves placing a small bowl of water on the windowsill just before midnight. This quiet act is done with reverence and care. The still water becomes a mirror to the unseen world, reflecting not only the moonlight, but, some say, the faces of those who will soon depart from the household. It is said that if a visitor's reflection appears in the bowl, it is a sign that someone in the home is destined to leave, whether by choice or by fate. The bowl of water ritual is neither feared nor dismissed. It is accepted as part of the fragile balance between life and loss. The reflection, flickering and wavering in the moon's light, is a reminder of the thin veil between this world and the next, between the present and the uncertain future. Near doorways and hearths, bundles of dried sage, cedar, or sweetgrass hang, their fragrances faint but persistent, sharp, earthy scent that cuts through the pervasive dust. On nights when sleep is elusive and shadows seem too long, these bundles are burned slowly, their smoke curling upward in delicate spirals meant to purify the air and ward off wandering spirits. The smoke is a balm, an offering, a shield against the unseen dangers that are said to drift through cracks in the walls or slip beneath the doors. Children are raised with stories of the Dust Woman, a mysterious figure who moves silently through the fields when the wind is strongest. She is described as neither cruel nor kind, but an embodiment of the land's indifferency, reminder that the earth claims all in its own time and way. Her feet never touch the ground. She glides, elusive as a whisper. To glimpse her is to be reminded of mortality, the fragile thread on which life hangs in these dry, desolate places. These stories are shared quietly, often in the low light of evening, when the house is settled and the day's labors have ceased. They are told not to frighten but to prepare, to remind all who hear them of the power beyond human control and the need for respect and humility in the face of such forces. The moon's cycle shapes many of these hidden beliefs. The new moon, when darkness is deepest and the sky offers no light, is a time for fasting, reflection, and quiet rituals. Families often create small talismans, knots of braided cloth, bits of old tools, or stones marked with simple carvings that they tuck beneath their clothing. These talismans are thought to protect against sickness and ill fortune, physical and spiritual alike. They are humble but precious shields against the vulnerability that pervades life in these hard times. The full moon, shining brightly and casting long silver shadows, brings a different kind of ritual. Families gather in the fields, sometimes in secret, leaving offerings of grain, corn, or cloth as prayers to the earth and sky. These are quiet moments of hope and supplication, a way to coax the unyielding land, to show mercy, to bring rain, to restore balance. The offerings are simple, but their meaning is vast, a silent pact between human will and nature's indifferent forces. Even the smallest acts of daily life are infused with ritual. Sweeping the porch at dawn becomes more than a chore. It is a symbolic clearing away of dust, despair, and bad fortune. Tying knots in scarves or arranging stones in specific patterns are gestures of protection and remembrance, a way to impose order on a world that seems increasingly chaotic and fragile. You might imagine sitting with a family around a low fire, the flickering flames casting soft, shifting shadows across faces etched by hardship and quiet resolve. The stories shared are gentle and steady accounts of dust devils that foretold rain long overdue, prayers whispered to the moon's pale face, dreams wrapped in dust and silence. The crackling fire punctuates the steady rhythm of their voices, weaving a tapestry of memory and faith fear, and hope. Outside, the wind continues its endless dance, swirling dust and secrets in equal measure. It carries the scent of dry earth, of sage smoke, of faded hope. Yet within the house, amidst whispered prayers and quiet rituals, there is a fragile sanctuary, a silent promise that even when the world is cracked and barren, the human heart will seek light, meaning, and the courage to endure. This delicate balance of belief and reality, of ritual and survival, is the hidden backbone of life here during these relentless years. Though the land may withhold its bounty, the spirits and stories that flow beneath the surface provide a steady rhythm, a quiet anchor in a world that threatens to drift apart. You breathe in the stillness of this moment, feeling the dust settle gently around you, soft as a whispered lullaby. The night deepens, the lantern's flame dances softly, and the invisible dance of dust devils continues, spinning messages only the patient and the faithful can hear. The relentless dust settles on cracked earth and tired shoulders, stretching endlessly beneath a pale, unyielding sun. Yet, even in this vast quiet of hardship, the people who remain tether themselves to fragile lifelines, the folk rituals and quiet ceremonies woven into daily life, soft and steady as a heartbeat in the wilderness of despair. These rituals, often unspoken, sometimes forgotten, except by those who still believe, carry weight far beyond their simple forms. Each a silent prayer, a whispered promise, a delicate act of defiance against the slow erosion of hope. Imagine yourself stepping into a humble farmhouse as evening falls, a place where the air is dry but faintly scented with the faint, sweet smoke of burning herbs. The wood floors creak softly beneath your feet. A small family gathers quietly around a well-worn table, the flickering light of a single oil lamp casting dancing shadows that ripple gently across their weathered faces. Here, the rituals begin, not with grand gestures, but with the smallest of acts, laden with meaning. In the corner, a mother picks up a handful of dried sage and cedar, gathered during fleeting moments when the land allowed growth. She bundles the herbs carefully into a smudge stick, tying it with a faded strip of cloth. This smudging is both cleansing and protection, meant to sweep away not only the dust that settles visibly, but also the invisible heaviness of worry, sickness, and loss. The smoke seems to wrap around the room like a gentle shroud, softening the sharp edges of the day's hardships. As it drifts upward, it carries the unspoken hopes that the house might be shielded from the bitterness of the wind outside. Around the kitchen table, stories begin to weave themselves into the night air. These are not just tales, but living memories handed down through generations, songs and stories of ancestors who survived droughts and floods, who walked miles toward new lands, who held tight to the fragile hope of harvest despite seasons of hunger. Each voice, soft and steady, keeps the past alive, grounding the present in the strength of those who came before. Before venturing out each morning, many hold their own private rituals, small moments of reverence amid the harsh routine of survival. A pinch of cornmeal or flour may be sprinkled at the threshold of the door, a humble offering meant to honor the spirits, believed to watch over the land and home. It is a gesture of respect and hope, inviting protection in a world where the next day's fortune is never guaranteed. Planting rituals carry a sacred weight, too. As seeds are pressed into the cracked soil, quiet prayers follow, some spoken softly, others only breathed in thought. Sometimes a bit of water from a well or a jar is sprinkled over the ground, symbolizing life amid barrenness. Life still holds the promise of renewal. Everyday objects become talismans, worn tools, faded cloths, stones smoothed by river currents, each imbued with stories of endurance and protection. These tokens are passed from one generation to the next, silent keepers of memory and hope. A mother might tuck a worn piece of fabric into her child's pocket, whispering a blessing for strength. A father might press a smooth stone into a child's hand, a reminder of resilience against the trials yet to come. When night falls fully and the wind rises again, families sometimes gather outside beneath the vast unbroken sky. Here, around a modest fire, they create a circle of shared solace. The flickering flames cast long, gentle shadows across faces marked by hardship but softened by the comfort of presence. Rather, they are spaces of quiet communion, places where prayers, stories, and songs are shared in hushed tones. Tales of seasons, both good and cruel, and lessons etched into memory by generations who understood loss and perseverance. The voices rise and fall in gentle harmonies, weaving a cocoon of sound that shields against the encroaching loneliness of the night. Music here is a balm. Lullabies sung softly to sleeping children, steady drum beats echoing the heartbeat of the earth. A guitar's gentle strum that carries long after the last note fades into the night air. Through these songs, the past and present entwine, offering a reminder that survival is not only physical but spiritual. The smallest acts become rituals. The morning's first cup of coffee, brewed slowly and savored despite its bitterness, becomes a moment of grounding. A quiet prayer for endurance, the careful folding of a quilt, the lighting of a candle before bed, the tracing of a cross on a weathered wooden beam. Each action carries intention, a whisper that life continues even in hardship. In some homes, simple charms are crafted with reverence, knots tied in worn cloth, carved wooden figures, or small stones marked with symbols. These are not mere trinkets, but vessels of power, believed to ward off sickness, bad luck, or wandering spirits. Such charms are treasured, often carried close to the body or placed near beds. Reminders that protection exists in both the seen and unseen worlds. The belief in protective spirits and ancestral watchers offers a framework to understand the unpredictability of life. It is neither blind faith nor desperate superstition, but a complex, intimate relationship with a world that often feels indifferent. These beliefs provide comfort and structure, a means of making peace with the uncertainties that mark each day. Cloth or coin, simple gifts meant to honor the land, the ancestors, or the spirits believed to linger near. These acts acknowledge that the earth is not just a resource, but a living presence, deserving of respect, even as it challenges those who depend on it. The rhythm of these beliefs and rituals pulses softly beneath the surface of everyday life, steady and persistent as the turning of the seasons. They are the quiet hum of hope amid despair, a testament to the human capacity for meaning and endurance when all else seems fragile. Even as dust settles on every surface and the land lies parched beneath the relentless sun, these rituals carry a promise that life endures, that memory persists, and that hope, however fragile, will continue to flicker in the hearts of those who remain. Outside, the wind never truly ceases its dance. It stirs the dust and secrets, carrying whispers of prayers and songs into the dark. But inside these homes, beneath the soft glow of lanterns and the warm embrace of shared belief, the spirit holds fast. The land may be cracked, the days long, and the harvest sparse. But within the quiet rituals of hope, the human heart finds its strength, delicate, enduring light in the midst of dust and shadow. Imagine yourself stepping through the grand, polished doors of a stately hotel ballroom nestled in a city just miles away from the cracked, dust-choked farms. The outside world, with its relentless sun and barren fields, seems a distant memory here. Inside, the air is thick with warmth, the soft glow of chandeliers casting pools of golden light on gleaming hardwood floors. The scent of polished wood, delicate floral arrangements, and the faint trace of expensive perfume envelops you, inviting a momentary escape from the harshness beyond, punctuated by soft laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. The sound is soothing, a steady undercurrent that mingles with the lilting notes of a jazz band tucked into a corner, their instruments weaving a slow, gentle melody that seems to wrap the entire room in a warm embrace. Around you, men in tailored tuxedos and women in flowing gowns glide gracefully across the floor. Pearls and diamonds catch the eye, nestled delicately at necks and wrists, whispering of wealth and elegance. The men's shoes gleam under the chandeliers, cufflinks glinting as they raise glasses in polite toasts. The atmosphere is one of refinement and restrained luxury, a carefully maintained veneer that shields its occupants from the harsher realities outside these walls. This is a world where fortunes are both celebrated and guarded, where every gesture carries meaning and every smile hides a calculation. The gala tonight is not simply a social event. It is a gathering of the city's financial and political elite. The guests exchange more than pleasantries. Beneath the polished surface, deals are struck, alliances formed, and power quietly brokered. The night hums with potential, the energy both electric and measured. In one corner, a small group of bankers leans in close, their voices low but animated. Discussions swirl around land values, the fluctuating prices of commodities, and the latest whispers from Washington regarding government programs aimed at stabilizing the fragile economy. The weight of these conversations is palpable, for the fortunes they manipulate ripple outward, touching the lives of those laboring in the parched fields beyond. You might imagine a woman, her fingers wrapped delicately around a champagne flute. She nods thoughtfully, her expression carefully neutral. But her eyes betray a sharper intelligence-aware of the stakes, the subtle balances of risk and reward. Elsewhere, a couple dances slowly to the jazz band's soft rhythms. Their smiles are warm but measured, a careful performance of ease in a world where appearances are currency. The food and drink add to the scene's richness. Servers glide silently among the guests, carrying trays of shrimp cocktails glistening with freshly squeezed lemon, delicate arranged with artful precision, and glasses of sparkling champagne that catch the light like liquid gold. The scents mingle in the air-briny seafood, rich butter, and the faint spice of exotic perfumes, all underpinned by the subtle aroma of polished leather and cedar from the nearby smoking lounge. The music, too, plays a crucial role in setting the evening's tone, creating a hypnotic rhythm that invites relaxation even as it energizes the room. The melodies ripple outward, connecting guests in a shared, unspoken experience, a momentary reprieve from the wider troubles of the world. Yet beneath the glamour and celebration, There is an undercurrent of tenshina, quiet awareness that this prosperity rests precariously atop foundations shaken by drought, debt, and despair. Many here have fortunes tied to land values and crop yields that fluctuate with each passing storm or drought. The policies debated in shadowed rooms influence the fates of countless farming families, yet those families remain far removed from this glittering scene. Imagine standing at the edge of this ballroom, gazing out through tall windows that reveal the dark silhouette of the farmland beyond. The contrast between these two worlds is stark: the soft glow and laughter here versus the cold quiet of empty fields, the polished floors versus cracked earth, the smell of perfume against the dry scent of dust. Despite the distance and difference, the two worlds are deeply entwined. The decisions made amid laughter and light will ripple out, touching lives hundreds of miles away. As the night deepens and the guests relax further into their roles, the conversations grow softer, more intimate. Yet the sharp edge of ambition never dulls entirely. Each handshake, each exchange of glances, carries the weight of futures yet decided. You might imagine a man stepping away from the crowd, his expression thoughtful as he gazes toward the horizon where the city lights blur into the darkness of farmland. In his hands, a contract folded carefully, a signature yet to be made that could change the fate of many. The gala continues, a delicate dance of light and shadow, hope and calculation. Outside, the distant stars shine quietly over a land waiting for relief. The contrast between velvet and gold inside and dust and toil beyond is a reminder of the complexities of this era where wealth and want exist side by side, intertwined in a fragile balance. The music swells softly once more, carrying the guests into the night's final hours. The laughter fades gently, glasses are set down with care, and the shimmering gowns and polished shoes begin to disappear into the velvet night. Stepping back through the grand doors, you return to the quiet streets, feeling the cool air settle softly around you. The distant hum of the city fades as you imagine the stretch of land beyond fields cracked and empty, waiting for the dawn, waiting for rain. Here, in this moment, the worlds converge, the elegance of the gala and the endurance of the farm's two sides of the same story, woven together by threads of hope, hardship, and the unyielding passage of time. The evening deepens, and the gala pulses on like a living, breathing organism, its heart beating in sync with the low murmurs of conversation and the soft rise and fall of jazz melodies drifting through the air. As you move through the room, imagine how the light settles gently on polished surfaces, the gleam of crystal glasses catching the chandelier's sparkle, the soft shimmer of silk gowns brushing lightly past velvet drapes. Here, in this cocoon of elegance and artifice, the worries and harsh realities of the outside world seem momentarily muted, as if held at bay by the very opulence surrounding you. Yet beneath the layers of luxury and polite smiles lies a complex web of ambition, calculation, and cautious negotiation. The city's financial elite are gathered not merely to enjoy themselves, but to navigate the subtle, delicate balance of influence and power that sustains their standing. Every conversation is measured, every handshake carries weight far beyond the moment, and every toast echoes with implications that ripple outward into the vast, dusty plains beyond the city limits. Picture a cluster of men in finely tailored suits. The New Deal programs are a frequent topic, with opinions varying widely. Some see these policies as lifelines, careful steps toward stabilizing a battered economy. Others regard them as risks, entangling the government in ways that could unsettle fragile markets or redistribute wealth in unpredictable fashions. Amid the group, a man with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes sketches diagrams on a napkin lines representing land parcels, loan amounts, and repayment schedules. He gestures carefully, outlining potential deals and the risks they carry. His colleagues listen intently, nodding slowly, their faces etched with the quiet gravity of men who understand that their decisions could determine the fate of entire communities. Nearby, a woman draped in deep green silk sips from a delicate glass of champagne. She exchanges a few words with a younger man whose crisp suit contrasts with his slightly nervous smile. They discuss terms of an upcoming land acquisition, the nuances of interest rates, and the prospects of governmental backing. Their voices are soft but purposeful, the conversation a dance of persuasion and subtle power. Elsewhere, a politician moves fluidly among the guests, his manner polished and confident, shaping policies that aim to manage the sprawling crisis gripping the rural heartland. Yet, despite his polished exterior, there is an unmistakable tension in his eyes, an unspoken acknowledgement of the difficult balancing act between political survival and genuine relief for suffering constituents. Amid this carefully curated elegance, there are moments when the mask slips briefly, revealing flickers of worry or hesitation. You might notice a woman tracing a thin gold ring on her finger as she listens to a grim update on foreclosures sweeping through neighboring counties. Or a man pausing mid-toast, his smile faltering ever so slightly as he contemplates the human stories behind the numbers, families losing their land, neighbors forced to leave homes passed down for generations. The stark contrast between this world of velvet and gold and the barren. Families rise before dawn to face days of endless labor, shoring up fences, tending to dying crops, and wrestling with the ever-looming threat of bank repossession. Here, in the ballroom, the sounds are soft laughter and tinkling glasses. There, the wind carries whispers of despair. The delicate food served at the gala, plump shrimp cocktails drizzled with lemon, miniature sandwiches layered with smoked ham and mustard. This stands in quiet, poignant contrast to the meager meals eaten in farmhouses miles away. Simple cornbread, thin soup, or a bowl of beans, simmered over a modest fire. Music plays a subtle but powerful role in weaving the evening's atmosphere. This music offers comfort and escape, but also reminds guests of a world moving forward, of change, possibility, and the promise of new rhythms after hardship. As the night progresses, the conversations take on a more personal tone. Guests share anecdotes and memories of family estates and childhood summers spent in sun-dappled gardens. Stories of lavish holidays, distant travels, and social triumphs contrast with the hard realities many farmers face daily. These moments of shared humanity provide brief respite from the broader economic anxieties, but also highlight the gulf between privilege and hardship. Yet even here, amid champagne toasts and silk gowns, the crisis touches lives in subtle, inescapable ways. Some guests express concern for the social upheaval these movements may bring, while others debate the best strategies to protect investments without stifling progress. Imagine a young banker quietly excusing himself from the main room to stand alone by a tall window. Beyond the city lights, the faint outline of farmland stretches toward the horizon. reminder of the fragile line between prosperity and ruin. He stares out, the soft glow of the ballroom behind him casting a halo of light. In his hand, a folded letter from a farmer pleading for an extension on a mortgage. The weight of responsibility presses heavily on him, the stark contrast between numbers on a ledger and human faces growing more acute. Elsewhere, a philanthropic hostess moves gracefully among the guests, distributing small donations pledged to local relief efforts. Her smile is warm, but carries the faint shadow of the burden she feels caught between the worlds of wealth and want, privilege and necessity. She listens carefully to the stories of hardship relayed by visiting agricultural advocates and rural representatives, vowing silently to do what she can. The gala also serves as a venue for subtle performances of status and belonging. Guests compete in quiet ways through the cut of a dress, the sparkle of jewelry, the effortless charm of a well-delivered anecdote. These social rituals form an intricate dance that sustains the fragile hierarchies of the time, providing a sense of order and control amid widespread uncertainty. But even the most dazzling smile cannot fully mask the pervasive anxiety. Beneath the opulent veneer lies an unspoken question. How long can this world of velvet and gold endure when the foundation is built on dust and debt? As midnight approaches, the music softens and the crowd begins to thin. Guests exchange farewells, their faces a mix of relief and lingering concern. Promises to meet again are made with varying degrees of sincerity, as everyone senses the shifting tides beneath their feet. You might imagine stepping outside into the cool night air, the city's distant hum replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the whisper of wind over fields waiting for rain. The Grand Hotel stands silent, its lights dimmed, the echoes of laughter and music fading into memory. In this quiet, the two worlds, one of wealth and one of want, linger side by side, bound together in a delicate balance of hope, hardship, and the unyielding passage of time. The gala's velvet and gold may sparkle brilliantly for a night, but beyond the city limits, the land waits patiently for renewal, and the people continue their daily struggle to survive. Imagine yourself stepping quietly through the tall stone pillars of a government building that sits at the heart of the nation's political capital, a place far removed from the dust-blown farms and shimmering gala halls. This imposing structure holds the weight of countless decisions made behind closed doors, where the fate of millions is debated in muted voices and measured steps. The scent of old paper, polished wood, and faint traces of ink linger in the air, mixing with the steady tick of grand clocks, marking time in a place where urgency and caution intertwine. Within these walls, rooms filled with long tables and high-backed chairs host meetings where maps, charts, and reports spread out like battle plans. The men and women here, bureaucrats, economists, policymakers, lean in close, speaking softly but with determined purpose. Their task is immense: to navigate a crisis born of dust and debt, to balance the fragile economy's needs against the human toll of a nation in distress. The government programs born of the New Deal represent a sprawling attempt to manage an unfolding catastrophe. Initiatives like the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the Resettlement Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps aim to provide relief, stimulate recovery, and reform an agricultural system buckling under strain. Yet the machinery of government is vast and slow, turning steadily but often struggling to meet the immediate needs of the families watching their livelihoods slip away. Imagine a policy advisor glasses perched low on his nose, quietly reviewing stacks of letters from farmers whose words drip with desperation. Each plea is a story: a family threatened with foreclosure, a child lost to illness born of poverty, a final mule sold to cover debts. The advisor's expression is calm but heavy, knowing that while some promises of aid will be fulfilled, others may falter beneath political compromise and budget limits. Across the hallway, a group of senior officials debates the allocation of funds with careful precision. Maps dotted with colored pins show regions devastated by drought and economic collapse. Charts trace crop prices, loan defaults, and migration patterns. Every number is a human life, every statistic a story of struggle. Yet the conversations remain clinical, the focus on balancing competing demands rather than the faces behind the data. In one corner, a young woman types slowly at a typewriter, her fingers tapping the keys with a rhythm steady and unhurried. She transcribes reports from rural agents' accounts of dust storms so thick they blot out the sun, of children coughing in classrooms filled with dry, gritty air, of neighbors forced to leave behind homesteads worn thin by hardship. Her role is to transform these human experiences into documents that will influence decisions made far from the fields. Imagine now a lobbyist moving gracefully through the corridors, his polished shoes barely making a sound on the marble floor. He carries portfolios of land holdings and loan agreements, and his voice is soft but insistent in conversations with legislators and officials. His influence is subtle yet profound, shaping policy language and funding priorities in ways that protect the interests of powerful landowners and banks. His world of strategy and negotiation contrasts sharply with the raw realities of farming life beyond the city limits. Nearby, a politician preparing for a speech scans a stack of briefings, his brow furrowed in concentration. He understands the urgency of relief programs and the political necessity of maintaining public confidence. His words will reach millions, offering hope tempered with realism. Yet behind the polished rhetoric lies the delicate balancing act of satisfying both constituents' demands and the powerful interests shaping policy from behind the scenes. While the government strives to act, its programs often move with the slow, deliberate pace of a massive engine. Loans and subsidies are dispersed with careful scrutiny, eligibility determined by complex criteria. Many farmers wait anxiously, unsure if the relief promised will reach them before their last seed is sown or their home lost to auction. Bureaucratic delays and administrative hurdles mean that aid sometimes arrives too late or not at all. Picture a rural family gathered around a dim lantern in a weathered farmhouse, listening to a radio broadcast from the capital. They hear the government's announcements, the assurances of support, and the outlines of new policies meant to ease their burden. Yet the flicker of the flame casts shadows on tired faces, revealing the deep uncertainty beneath the hopeful words. The distance between government offices and dirt floors seems vast and unbridgeable. The Resettlement Administration offers one glimmer of hope to those willing or forced to move, plans to relocate entire families to more fertile regions, with the promise of new opportunities. But this promise is complicated, marked by the pain of leaving ancestral lands and the fear of unfamiliar places. For many, the idea of starting over is both a lifeline and a loss. Meanwhile, the Agricultural Adjustment Act seeks to stabilize crop prices by paying farmers to reduce acreage, an effort to balance supply and demand. But this policy brings its own tensions, especially for tenant farmers and sharecroppers, who are often excluded from payments and face eviction when landowners cut back production. The game played in government offices, with its policies and programs, impacts lives unevenly, shaping who benefits and who falls further behind. Imagine sitting in a quiet office as a government agent prepares a report to send to higher authorities. He reviews interviews with families who have lost everything, community leaders pleading for more support, and economists warning of the fragile balance between relief and economic stability. His pen moves slowly, each word chosen with care to convey urgency without panic, hope without false promises. Outside the window, the city hums quietly beneath the fading light. The polished marble and brass of government halls seem worlds away from the cracked earth and broken fences of the farms. Yet the policies shaped here ripple outward, crossing those miles invisibly but decisively. The chessboard is expansive, with pawns, knights, bishops, and kings moving through the language of legislation, budgets, and political alliances. Some moves bring relief, others prolong hardship. The farmers' lands are the stakes on which the game is played, while their lives often remain unseen in the calculations. As the day winds down and offices dim their lights, the weight of responsibility lingers. Papers are filed, phones ring softly, and the machinery of governance continues its steady work, an ongoing attempt to navigate an era defined by crisis and hope. You might step outside into the cool evening air, feeling the contrast between the quiet order of the city and the restless, dust-laden winds sweeping over fields beyond. The night sky stretches wide and calm above, full of stars that have watched over these struggles for generations. In this space between power and people, between policy and survival, the story of the Great Depression's farms finds its last moves, marked by both the resilience of those who endure and the intricate games played in halls of influence far away. As the late evening deepens, the halls of government settle into a quiet rhythm that contrasts sharply with the ceaseless toil of the farms beyond the city's edge. But even in this seeming stillness, the wheels of policy and power continue to turn slowly, deliberately, shaping futures in ways often unseen and rarely understood by those who live under the relentless sun and sweeping dust. Imagine sitting in a high-ceilinged, wood-paneled office, its large windows looking out over a city glittering with lights. Papers are strewn across a polished desk, detailing the latest reports on farm foreclosures, crop failures, and migration patterns. A soft glow from a banker's lamp casts long shadows, the air thick with the faint scent of ink and old leather-bound ledgers. Here, a handful of policymakers pore over the complex data, their discussions low but earnest. They speak carefully of loan restructuring, price supports, and production controls, terms that sound abstract, but which, in practice, determine whether a family keeps its land or joins the thousands who will pack up and leave. The language is measured, technical, often distancing the human cost behind sterile economic concepts. Yet, beneath the jargon lies an acute awareness. These decisions, these policies, will ripple outward, changing lives in profound ways. One man gestures to a large map dotted with pins and colored markers. The pins cluster heavily over the southern plains, the hardest-hit areas where dust storms have eroded topsoil and hope alike. If we increase price supports here, he says quietly, we might slow the exodus. But it will cost more than Congress has allocated. A pause follows, the weight of that reality settling in. Another adds, but if we don't, entire counties could depopulate within a year. Schools will close, local economies collapse. It's not just about economics, it's about communities. Outside this room, the real effects unfold in vivid, unvarnished detail. Families rise before dawn, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. Imagine the texture of worn wooden floorboards beneath bare feet. The smell of strong black coffee brewed thick and hot to fuel a day that stretches long and unyielding. Hands cracked and calloused from constant labor brush away grit as men and women prepare for the day ahead, shoring up fences against wind, mending tools worn thin, coaxing the last life from tired crops. Children, their faces often smudged with dust and soot, hurry to schoolhouses with windows rattling in the wind. Their lessons are punctuated by coughing fits, the dry air scratching lungs and throats. The curriculum itself feels distant from the harsh realities outside history, math, and reading. While outside the fields await the farmer's steady, unrelenting hands. You might picture a mother kneeling by a simple stove, stirring a pot of beans thickened with salt pork. The aroma is humble but nourishing, a small comfort in a home where cupboards are often bare and meals lean. The family eats quietly, the weight of uncertainty settling over the table like a shadow. Meanwhile, back in government offices, debates continue about how best to manage this crisis. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, designed to pay farmers not to plant certain crops in hopes of raising prices, is contentious. On paper, it aims to reduce surpluses and stabilize the market. But in practice, it often exacerbates inequality. Landowners receive payments, but tenant farmers and sharecroppers, already among the most vulnerable, may find themselves displaced as landowners reduce acreage or evict those who work the land. Imagine a tenant farmer, his hands stained with earth, standing outside a newly shuttered farmhouse. His family's belongings are packed into a battered wagon, ready for a journey westward. The land he once tended with care is empty now, a quiet testament to a system that values property and profit over people. His face is worn, his eyes clouded with a mixture of loss and determination. The promise of government relief feels distant and inadequate, a lifeline just out of reach. Simultaneously, programs like the Resettlement Administration seek to offer a different kind of hope-planned communities and farms where displaced. Families might start anew. These initiatives involve relocating people to more fertile lands with modern housing, schools, and infrastructure. Yet, the process is complex and fraught with challenges. Families must uproot themselves from familiar places, risking the loss of community, tradition, and identity. New settlements can feel alien with unfamiliar neighbors and landscapes. Not all relocated families find success. Many struggle with the transition, their dreams tempered by reality. Consider the story of a young couple newly settled in one of these government-planned communities. Their modest house, built with sturdy wood and painted in soft pastels, stands neat and clean against the horizon. Inside, a small radio plays soft music, a fragile thread connecting them to a wider world. They tend a patch of land, hopeful but cautious. Their days are long and filled with work, their nights quiet with exhaustion. They cling to the hope that this new start will sustain them through uncertain times. Beyond these programs, the government's reach extends into more subtle realms. The Civilian Conservation Corps enlists young men to work on environmental restoration, planting trees to combat erosion, building terraces on hillsides, and restoring damaged ecosystems. This effort not only addresses the ecological damage caused by decades of overfarming and drought, but also provides much-needed employment and a sense of purpose. Imagine a group of these young men gathered around a campfire, their faces lit by flickering flames. They share stories from home, dreams deferred but not forgotten. The work is hard and sometimes dangerous, but it offers a reprieve from the despair that so often blankets their communities. Yet, even with these programs, gaps remain. The pace of relief cannot match the speed of crisis. Some families fall through the cracks, caught between bureaucracy and circumstance. The fragmented nature of aid dependent on eligibility, geography, and politics means that many endure hardship in silence. Back in the halls of power, discussions turn to long-term reform. Ideas of soil conservation, sustainable farming, and rural electrification are debated and slowly take shape. These proposals promise to reshape agriculture and rural life for decades to come, offering a vision beyond immediate relief toward resilience and renewal. But policy is a slow dance, requiring consensus, funding, and political will. The chessboard is crowded, and moves must be made with care. The stakes remain high. Entire ways of life hang in the balance. As night deepens, you might imagine the quiet streets outside government buildings. The city's bright lights stand in contrast to the darkness of the surrounding countryside. The wind carries a hint of dust and distant rain, whispering through trees and empty fields alike. In this liminal space between power and people, policy and survival, the story of the Great Depression's rural heartland finds its enduring echo, a testament to struggle, adaptation, and the slow, unyielding passage of time. As we draw this long journey through the dust and debt, the despair and determination of those who lived as farmers during the Great Depression, it is fitting to pause now in gentle contemplation. Imagine yourself resting in a quiet room, the soft glow of a lamp casting warm shadows, the day's troubles slowly melting away with each steady breath. The story we have explored is one of contrasts between cracked earth and polished marble, between the relentless sun that scorched the fields and the cool, elegant ballrooms of distant cities. It is a tale woven from the lives of those who toiled from dawn to dusk, whose hands knew the texture of soil and grit, and those who held power in offices far removed from dust and hardship. You may carry with you the images of mornings heavy with grit, of endless days spent shoveling dirt and repairing fences, of families fractured by loss and hope. The voices of those who kept diaries hidden away in root cellars, whispering stories of crop failure and lost children, remind us of the personal toll beneath sweeping history. You have felt the tension between folk rituals that sought to tame the unseen forces of dust and despair, and the jazzy celebrations of wealth and power just miles away. The contrast between velvet and gold and cracked earth is stark, yet these worlds were intertwined, locked in a slow, subtle dance of influence and indifference. Government programs tried to play chess with land and livelihood, often moving too slowly to reach the heart of suffering, yet laying the groundwork for future resilience. As you imagine this past, Allow yourself to recognize both the harsh realities faced and the quiet strength that endured. The Great Depression was a time of profound challenge, yet also a time of adaptation, community, and the first steps toward new ways of living and farming that would shape the decades to come. Now, as your breathing slows and your mind begins to drift, let the stories settle gently, like dust falling in the fading light, soft, inevitable, and part of the endless rhythm of history. The cracked earth may dry, but beneath its surface, seeds lie waiting for rain. The shadows of hardship give way to dawn, and in this calm, you may find rest, comfort, and the quiet promise of renewal. Thank you for sharing this journey through a world where life was often hard, but never without hope. Good night.